need to mention Radcliffe here, who never visited India, but was given 5 weeks to draw the border and split the whole subcontinent. Now, do you think the total disconnect with the land and its people basically is the big cause of this chaos?
It's a detail. I mean, the British, of course, had the attitude that somebody who knew India would have their own biases, they'd have their own friendships, they'd have their own opinions. So better to have somebody who knew nothing. And therefore, the detachment that Radcliffe brought to his task was supposed to be a virtue, number one. Number two, Radcliffe had never visited India, but he actually did the job in India. He was brought to Delhi and parked in a bungalow on the viceregal estate, the Rashtrapati Bhavan Gardens of today. Now, the problem there is that there was not enough time, given the deadline of August 15, for him to actually go to either Punjab or Bengal. So he literally did the work only by looking at maps. And so you had this ridiculous series of lines, in many cases, cutting villages in half, in one notorious case, cutting a house in half, because he didn't realize there was a house there, or how much detail. There were no satellites and satellite photographs in those days. So the line was drawn without very much regard for everything. But what he had was the census figures of 1931. There was no census in 41. So he had figures that were 15 years old. He knew many of the things would be out of date. He knew that all he had was a map, and he was doing the rest by guesswork and intelligence. He was supposed to be a very brilliant man, so he did it that way. Radcliffe, I must say, when he did his award, he himself said that he should never come back to India because he knew somebody or the other would shoot him. And he never did come back to India. He had 5 weeks in India, sitting in the Rashtrapati Bhavan in the viceregal estate and dividing through his lines, homes, hearts, history, all being divided. Lines then meant lives, because once the lines were published, lives were lost as people desperately scrambled to get to the right side of the line. And so Hindus and Sikhs thought, for example, that certain places would remain in India. Suddenly they discovered after Independence Day, is when the map was published, that their homes had suddenly become a foreign country. They had to scramble to leave. The trains were jam-packed with people trying to get out. People were butchering people in their homes to force them to leave. There was murder and mayhem happening. There were examples of entire trainloads of corpses arriving on the other side, because literally people would climb on the trains and kill everybody because they knew everybody leaving was not from their religion. It was just one of those human tragedies. At least 1 million people lost their lives, and some 13 to 17 million were displaced. It really was a human tragedy that the world cannot imagine or hadn't seen before or since.
There's a powerful poem by W.H. Auden about Radcliffe's shot.
Oh God, yes, I know it well.
Have you had a chance to?
Yes, I know this poem. I know this poem rather well. Shut up in a lonely mansion with police night and day, patrolling the gardens to keep assassins away, he got down to work, to the task of settling the fate of millions. The maps at his disposal were out of date, and the census returns almost certainly incorrect. But there was no time to check them, no time to inspect contested areas. The weather was frightfully hot, and a bout of dysentery kept him constantly on the trot. But in 7 weeks it was done. The frontiers decided, a continent, for better or worse, divided. It's so sad. I mean, Auden was a brilliant poet. There's a little more to the poem than that, but the worst thing about it was, I think there's, if I'm not mistaken, there's a line in this poem about how he tells his club, that he'll never go back because if he does, he'll be shot. I think that's also in the poem. I mean, it's just the whole situation is unforgivable. I believe some years later, the BBC or somebody tried to interview him, there's a sort of poignant story about how much he regretted his role. In fact, one interesting detail is, at least he was a man of principle, he was so ashamed of what he had done that he refused to accept his salary. The British had offered him a very generous salary for this work, and he, being a lawyer, lawyers always charge high fees. He said, I can't take the money. What I've done is too much of a sin to bear. And he never took the salary.